Hey there, 8th grade. Making a follow-up video for your Chapter 5 and 6 study guide. This video is going to just be a real short one. We're going to cover the Supreme Court cases that you need to know. They're listed on your study guide. Let's see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So I'm going to walk through all 5, and essentially what you need to know is what these cases are about. So why are they important? What is the precedent that they set? And so we're just going to go through one by one. Oh, just got another message. This one's from, wait, who's it from? It's on Google Classroom. One of your classmates just sent it to me. Oh, it's from Samara. Dear Mr. Bruce, I like that you gave Matthew pickup line guidance, but what about the ladies? You're not sexist, are you? No, Samara, I'm actually not sexist. Ladies, you can use pickup lines too, although again, I think like I told Matthew in the last video, right now during all this coronavirus outbreak stuff, it's really not a good time to, be meeting people. Also, you guys are in 8th grade. You can pump the brakes. You don't need to be worried about dating until you get to high school. But that said, Samara, I gave a couple pickup lines to Matthew, so you can use them too. Let's see. How about, let me think. Oh, hey babe. I know all the libraries are closed, so I thought I'd check you out instead. That one's a good one. Hey, you can't spell quarantine without U-R-A-Q-T. I really can't stay. Baby, it's COVID-19 outside. All right. Anyways, back to the Supreme Court cases. The lighting in this video is really not good. Sorry, I'm sitting outside in my house, and as Christina would be able to tell you, the sun is really bright right now in Chino Hills. So basically, no matter where I go or how I adjust this camera, I'm going to be in the sunlight. Oh well. All right, first case, Marbury versus Madison. So this is a really big Supreme Court decision. It's talked about in Chapter 3 of your book, in the Citizen Handbook. It's talked about, I think, in Chapter 4, and again in Chapter 5. So what do you need to know about Marbury versus Madison? You don't need to know all the details about the Judiciary Act of 1789 and Judge Marbury. What you do need to know is that Marbury versus Madison established judicial review. And by doing so, it dramatically expanded the power of the Supreme Court and dramatically reduced the power of Congress. All right. So in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court said that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional. So remember, the Judiciary Act of 1789 is a law that Congress made that applies to the Supreme Court. All right, so Congress made a law about the Supreme Court. In the decision, the Supreme Court said the power of the Supreme Court comes from the Constitution. It does not come from Congress. Therefore, Congress cannot make any laws that control the Supreme Court. Now, that's not really what the Judiciary Act of 1789 does, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that in saying that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional, the Supreme Court was giving itself the power of judicial review. All right? And judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court to get rid of laws that it says violate the Constitution. So why does this matter? Well, basically, it gives 9 people, because there's 9 people on the Supreme Court, it gives those 9 people the power to get rid of any act of Congress that they want. As long as there's a majority, as long as 5 of them vote to get rid of it, those 5 people have the power to get rid of any law that Congress makes. Right? This significantly weakens the power of Congress, because now every time they're going through that really long process of making a law, remember that really lengthy process involving all those committees and subcommittees and how a bill becomes a law and how it takes forever, and then the president has to sign it and the president might veto it, and it's a really long process. In the back of their minds, they're going to be thinking, uh-oh, what if we do all this work and then the Supreme Court just completely eviscerates the law by using judicial review, right? So it basically gives the Supreme Court another check against Congress. It weakens Congress's power to make laws. It strengthens the Supreme Court's power to not just interpret laws, but also to get rid of laws it doesn't like. Now, as we saw with President Andrew Jackson, in the case of Worcester v. Georgia, so I want to skip down to Worcester v. Georgia, judicial review was applied in Worcester v. Georgia. Remember, in Worcester v. Georgia, the state of Georgia passed a law that basically said that the treaties that were made with the Cherokee tribe from like the early 1800s that said members of the Cherokee tribe were allowed to stay in the state of Georgia were not relevant. So Georgia passed a law saying that members of the Cherokee tribe and other Native American groups have to get out of Georgia, right? They have to leave, right? And the Cherokee said, well, wait a second, what about all these treaties that were made 30 years ago? They say we got to stay. And Georgia said, we don't care, because treaties with the United States don't apply to Georgia. So Native Americans, you might have made a deal with the United States, but you did not make a deal with the state of Georgia. State of Georgia law overrules the treaty. You got to get out, right? And then what did the Supreme Court do? The Supreme Court stepped in and said, no. Georgia doesn't have the power to do this. Whenever a state law violates a federal law, then the federal law wins out, right? So in Worcester v. Georgia, the Supreme Court tried to flex its muscles against the state of Georgia, and Andrew Jackson stepped in, and Andrew Jackson said, I don't care what the Supreme Court says. I'm going to allow Georgia to enforce its law, right? So the Supreme Court tried to get rid of Georgia's law, which probably was unconstitutional, like it actually was unconstitutional. And Andrew Jackson used the executive branch to say, the executive branch doesn't have to listen to the Supreme Court, right? So Worcester v. Georgia was a very interesting decision because some people think it actually weakened the power of the Supreme Court, right? So Marbury versus Madison strengthens the power of the Supreme Court. Worcester v. Georgia looks like it strengthens the power of the Supreme Court because it says state laws cannot conflict with federal laws, and if they do, then the state laws are automatically unconstitutional and you get rid of them, right? And Andrew Jackson said, no, I'm going to ignore the federal laws. I'm going to apply the state law in this case, right? And the Supreme Court couldn't do anything about it. They just kind of had to sit there and watch Andrew Jackson completely ignore what they said, all right? So Worcester v. Georgia is kind of complicated because if you read the decision says the federal government is more powerful than the state government, but in reality what actually happened is Andrew Jackson ignored the federal government and said, yeah, we're just going to do what the state of Georgia wants. Sorry, Native Americans, you got to go. All right, and then we got the three cases that strengthen the power of the federal government. Gibbons v. Ogden, Dartmouth College v. Woodward, and McCullough versus Maryland. Okay, so let's see. Where are these three cases? These are from chapter... Are they from chapter 5 or chapter 6? I don't remember. Hold on a second. I think they're from chapter 6. Ah, yes, chapter 6, section 1. All right, so we'll start with McCullough v. Maryland. McCullough v. Maryland, remember this is the case in which the Second Bank of the United States is being asked by Maryland to pay state taxes to Maryland. And in this case, The Supreme Court says that the power to tax involves the power to destroy. Therefore, Maryland does not have the power to tax a federal institution, which is the second bank of the United States. All right. So this is a case that says a state cannot pass any law that violates a federal law. All right. So this dramatically increases the power of the federal government, because it basically says when you have a state law that competes with a federal law and they contradict each other, the federal law wins, the state law has to fold, they lose. Okay. And also, states no longer have the power to tax federal buildings and federal businesses and things like that. All right. Dartmouth College v. Woodward. In this case, we have a private contract between Dartmouth College and this private contract that Dartmouth College says, or this private contract that Dartmouth College has, the state of New Hampshire tries to get involved in, right? So in this case, the court says that the state of New Hampshire does not have the power to interfere with Dartmouth College's private contract. So if you make a business deal like Dartmouth College did, the state can't just like waltz in there and be like, all right, now we're going to look at this contract and see if it's okay, and maybe see if we could get some tax money out of it, right? So the Supreme Court says states do not have the power to interfere with private contracts. Right? So this is really, this doesn't directly expand the power of the federal government, but what it does do is it weakens the power of the states. Right? It says, states, you cannot do this. Right? You can't mess with these private contracts. All right, last one, Gibbons v. Ogden. In this case, it says that there's this riverboat company, and this riverboat is transporting passengers between the state of New Jersey and New York, and this is interstate commerce, right? We talked about interstate commerce in the previous video. And the state of New York is trying to regulate this steamboat company, right? So they're actually trying to help the steamboat company with this regulation by giving them something called a monopoly, but you don't have to worry about that. And there's these other steamboat companies that are getting mad that the state of New York is helping this one steamboat company. And the Supreme Court steps in and says, wait a second, because this case involves interstate commerce, because it involves steamboats that are transporting people and goods between two states, it's crossing state lines, that means the states do not have the power to regulate it. Only the federal government can regulate interstate commerce. Right? So Gibbons v. Ogden, federal government can regulate interstate commerce, state governments cannot. All right, so on paper, all 5 of these cases significantly increase the power of at least some in the federal government. In reality, Worcester v. Georgia is a case that favors the state government over the federal government. But you could interpret all 5 of these cases in a way that seemed to expand the power of the federal government. All right, that's it for our Supreme Court case review. Next, I will be making a video to respond or to talk about the questions numbers 1 through 10, and then I'll make a 4th video talking about what you need to know for your tests and how it's going to work. All right, bye.